There is a number currently circulating through the halls of the Department of Justice that should make every American who has ever visited a drive-thru feel a sudden sense of vertigo: 97%. That isn't a figure representing market lead or brand recognition. It is the total, absolute control that exactly four Canadian-linked entities exert over the entire United States supply of frozen potato products. To put it bluntly, if you are eating a French fry in America today, there is a near mathematical certainty that it was processed, frozen, and shipped by a corporate structure that Washington is currently suing for operating an illegal price-fixing cartel. We are witnessing a historic paradox. The world's largest economy is taking its own life support system to court. At the center of this storm sits McCain Foods, a family-owned titan based in New Brunswick, Canada. Their reach is almost incomprehensible. According to their own internal metrics, 1 out of every 4 French fries consumed on this planet originates in a McCain facility. Whether you are under the golden arches of McDonald's or at a Wendy's window, there is a 25% statistical probability that your meal began its life in a Canadian factory. With 51 massive processing plants scattered across the globe, McCain, alongside Cavendish Farms, Simplot, and their subsidiaries, forms an unbreakable quadrumvirate. Together, they hold the great American side dish in a specialized frozen grip, and now, the U.S. government is attempting to break that grip with a massive antitrust litigation. The friction turned into a full-blown firestorm on February 1st, 2025. In a move designed to address trade imbalances and exert pressure on border security, President Donald Trump signed an executive mandate slapping a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports. The public messaging focused on industrial metals and fentanyl precursors. However, the data that remained in the shadows of the briefing room told a much more caloric story. Canada's agricultural engine sends roughly $40.5 billion in goods south every single year. Within that massive flow, $1.7 billion is represented exclusively by frozen potato products. The dependency isn't just significant, it is total. For the 2023 to 2024 production cycle, the U.S. was the destination for 96% of Canada's seed potatoes, 93% of its fresh potatoes, and 91% of its frozen fries. This isn't a casual trade partnership, it's a structural reliance. In the fourth quarter alone, Canada moved 680.7 million pounds of frozen potatoes into the U.S. That is the sheer volume required to keep American fast food prices from entering orbit. Yet despite this evidence, the administration maintained a posture of total self-sufficiency, with the president repeatedly stating, "We don't need anything from Canada." The math, quite simply, refuses to cooperate with the rhetoric. While the U.S. harvests 44 billion pounds of potatoes annually, it lacks the specialized high-scale processing infrastructure to turn those raw tubers into the frozen products the market demands. Building that capacity isn't a matter of months. It's a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year endeavor that no American firm has yet dared to undertake. By August 2025, the potato war escalated further. A 35% tariff was imposed on any goods falling outside the traditional CUSMA/USMCA framework. While some agricultural products technically maintained exemptions under complex rules of origin, the resulting political fog triggered a state of investment paralysis. By late October, a threatened 10% increase made the situation personal for the American household. This trade war isn't happening in an abstract boardroom, it's happening on your receipt. Over the last 5 years, while vegetable oil costs climbed by 50%, the price of a medium fry at McDonald's exploded by 134%, leaping from $1.79 in 2019 to $4.19 in 2024. The crisis is compounded by a double input problem. Canada doesn't just provide the potato, it provides the canola oil used to fry it. American processors are getting hit by a pincer movement of tariffs on both the raw commodity and the essential cooking medium. Why haven't they just moved production to Idaho or Maine? The answer lies in what processors call Canada's monopoly money. The weakness of the Canadian dollar makes it economically irrational to move production south. Producing in Canada and shipping to the U.S. remains cheaper than building new, high-cost American plants, even with the tariffs in place. The net result? The average American family is now absorbing an estimated $1,200 per year in trade war surcharges across their total grocery and dining expenses. The industry consensus is unanimous. This isn't just a minor disruption, it's an existential threat to the low-cost food model. The turning point of the conflict arrived not in Washington, but in the Canadian federal election of April 28, 2025. The victory of Mark Carney signaled a radical departure from traditional diplomacy. His campaign wasn't just about fiscal policy, it was a nationalistic referendum on Canadian sovereignty. Immediately following his win, Carney discarded the polite Canadian trope, stating bluntly, "Trump is trying to break us so he can own us." These 6 words served as a clear warning that Canada would no longer negotiate from a posture of supplication. The fragility of the relationship was laid bare at the G7 summit in Kananaskis. A pledged 30-day truce to find a bilateral framework collapsed in just 11 days. By June 27th, the U.S. suspended talks and announced fresh punitive measures. The response from the markets was a silent embargo. Between the first and second quarters of 2025, Canadian potato exports to the U.S. dropped by 17%, over 85,000 tons. This wasn't due to a government ban. It was the result of supply chains quietly beginning to look for the exit. What many analysts failed to realize is that Canada does not need to win a trade war to hurt the American consumer. It only needs to find new friends. Facing tariff walls in the south, Prince Edward Island growers and New Brunswick processors began aggressively courting the ASEAN bloc. Preliminary talks with Indonesia and other expanding Southeast Asian markets provided a glimpse of a future where Canada's potato wealth flows east rather than south. Carney's policy declaration was explicit. The decades-long process of ever closer economic relationship with the U.S. is over. Our strengths of being tied to America are now our vulnerabilities. This isn't just rhetoric, it's a commercial directive. If the U.S. market is volatile and unpredictable, the rational business move is to diversify. If Canada redirects even 15% of its frozen capacity to Asia, the American fast food industry faces a supply deficit it cannot fill. The United States currently has no answer to this. American domestic production of 44 billion pounds is a raw number that ignores the lack of processing plants. You cannot turn a raw potato into a McDonald's fry in a domestic kitchen. It requires the massive high-tech infrastructure that currently sits on the Canadian side of the border. In August 2025, a single sentence from Stephanie Blow, spokesperson for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, sent shivers through the American logistics sector. More time is needed to understand the true impact of the U.S. administration's tariff policy. In the language of high-stakes trade, that is not a status update, it is a threat. It signals that Canada is currently calculating exactly how much leverage it holds and how much it is willing to use. They aren't saying the pivot is finished, but they are certainly saying the just-in-time delivery system the U.S. takes for granted is no longer guaranteed. The 2025 trade war didn't result in a victory for protectionism. It resulted in a structural divorce. Canadian processors now have the political backing, the currency edge, and the newly opened Asian trade routes to fundamentally alter where their products go. The real tragedy of the 2025 potato war isn't found in the headlines of today, but in the menus of tomorrow. As Canadian supply chains begin their slow, permanent reorientation toward more stable partners in the East, the American consumer is left standing at a crumbling pillar of the cheap food era. We are forced to confront a reality we ignored for decades. Our diet is a globalized assembly line. When you weaponize trade against your primary supplier, you don't just bring jobs back, you make the product disappear. The structural question is no longer whether Americans will pay $5 for a small order of fries in 2026. The real question is, when the Cartel of Four finishes its pivot to Asia, where will the American potato actually come from? And more importantly, can Detroit or Washington build a processing plant fast enough to catch up?